Hello, everybody. Mike from Southern California again, and you're on the mic. So today, I'm going to take a break from anime news. I'm going to take a break from the Vic Mignogna defamation case to talk about one of my other, interests. Professional wrestling, particularly classic professional wrestling, as it was reported today that yesterday the passing of 8-time NWA World Heavyweight Champion and 3-time AWA World Tag Team Champion Harley Race, the passing of Harley Race. Harley Race's career spanned 4 decades. His in-ring career spanned 4 decades, went from 1960 to 1990. And then in the early 90s, in the early to mid 90s, had a managerial career, as well as had a notable promoting career as well. So I'll be going over that today a little bit here. So his introduction into the business was when Goose Karras, the promoter out of the St. Joseph territory, as part of the Central States promotion, hired him on to do odd jobs, and then he began wrestling for him, under different names, till an auto accident nearly took his leg before Goose Karras came in and said, "No, you're not taking the kid's leg." So he would eventually return to in-ring action in 1964 in the Funk Promotions Amarillo territory. For those of you from his 60s, as his in-ring career spanned 4 decades, 60s fans would remember him as one half of the Pretty Boy tag team with Pretty Boy Larry Hennig. That was in the AWA. That was constant rivals to Dick the Bruiser and Crusher. Dick the Bruiser Phyllis and Crusher Reggie Lakowski as the two teams would exchange titles on a number of occasions, culminating in the 3 AWA World Tag Team titles that Harley Race was a part of. During one of those reigns, as part of an angle, the Pretty Boy Larry Hennig was injured, kayfabe injured, to give him some time off, and he was replaced in the team by Chris Markoff. Fans of the 70s and early 80s would remember Harley Race from his NWA career, in which after his third tag title reign came to an end in the AWA, he and Larry Hennig had continued to be top contenders to the AWA World Tag Team titles until Race decided to focus more on his singles career, moving back to his home area of St. Louis and becoming a part of both the St. Louis and the Central States territory. For those of you who don't know, the Central States territory was one of the NWA territories that was focused in Iowa, Kansas, and Missouri. And then its sister promotion was the St. Louis Wrestling Club, run by Sam Munchnick, and then the Central States, of course, is run by Bob Geigel. Race would establish himself as a major NWA star between the years of 1970 and 74. Aside from winning his the 8 NWA World Tag Team titles, he would also win 8 Central States titles, as well as 7 NWA Missouri State heavyweight titles. Winning his first Missouri State heavyweight title on September 16, 1972, in which he beat Pak Song in the final of a very convoluted tournament from that year. they had decided to reestablish the Missouri State. This is the modern version of the Missouri State title that is still defended to this day. So he was the first winner that led to the reestablishment of it after a disagreement between Sam Munchnick and Bob Geigel over the Central States heavyweight title. Then in 1973, Race would also start his promoting career as he would buy into both the Central States and NWA St. Louis territories, as well as on May 24, 1973, Harley Race would have his first of his 8 NWA World Heavyweight titles, NWA World Heavyweight Championships, beating Dory Funk Jr. And it basically throughout this time from 1970 to 1984 with the NWA, he would go on to have feuds with the likes of the Funk Brothers, Jack Briscoe, Showy Giant Baba, Dusty Rhodes, and Ric Flair. Between the years of 1977 and 1982, he would have the majority of his NWA World titles, in which he would basically almost reign unopposed for the entire time, with the exception of a few short stints by Dusty Rhodes, Giant Baba, and Tommy Rich, having short NWA World Heavyweight title reigns during that time frame, culminating in him in a classic angle in 1983, after having beaten Ric Flair in the spring of that year for his seventh NWA World title. This led to the classic angle, that the $25,000 bounty angle that would eventually lead to the main event at Starrcade 1983, in which, determined not to lose the title again, Race put a bounty on Ric Flair's head that was eventually collected, that was believed to have forced Ric Flair into retirement, in which Bob Orton Jr. and Dick Slater had collected on that bounty in the Mid-Atlantic area, only for Ric Flair to come back and wrestle again, and which would lead to the main event at Starrcade 1983, Flair for the Gold, in which Ric Flair would beat Race for the title, as in a steel cage match, in a match that was viewed as Race officially passing the torch on to Flair, having Flair become the next main headliner for the NWA. Harley Race would have a 2-day reign that would officially be recognized here in the 21st century, during a trip in the South Pacific in New Zealand, in which he would beat Flair and then lose. He would beat Flair for the title, and then 2 days later lose it back to Flair. This, I think, was before Flair's eventual loss of the title to Kerry Von Erich. By this point, of course, Race's career was starting to wind down a bit. After this reign, of course, he eventually went back to AWA in 1984, in which he would start a feud with Curt Hennig, which would lead into a conflict with his former tag team partner, Larry the Axe Hennig. During this time, of course, Race would have feuds with Rick Martel, as well as AWA World Champion at the time, Nick Bockwinkel, 84 to 86. during his time there, and of course during this time as well, he was still, basically part owner of Central States, St. Louis territory that was eventually bought out by the WWF at the time, now known as WWE, as well as um, Central States, until they were eventually bought out by Jim Crockett Jr. in September of '86. But the fact that he was losing money as a promoter at the time is why even though he wanted to retire from the ring, he had to in order to keep making a living, he had to still focus on his in-ring career, and that's when he was in late 1986 was brought into the WWF by his longtime friend Bobby the Brain Heenan, who would be his manager. He would once again dye his hair blonde and go back to his handsome Harley race gimmick, which eventually, and at a time in which the WWF did not recognize other promotions or what wrestlers did and their accomplishment from other promotions, Race was slated and did eventually win the first King of the Ring. This was before the regular King of the Ring in the 90s. That was started up in '93. And he would become known as the King of the Ring to recognize his pedigree, and would lead to feuds with, of course, Junkyard Dog, Hacksaw Jim Duggan, and even WWF World Heavyweight Champion Hulk Hogan. Now, even though Race was at the end of his career, he was pretty much right in here to help, to also help, push the younger guys up on the card a bit. Give some guys a good, tough veteran until during a match with Hulk Hogan, he suffered an abdominal injury, trying to do his trademark swan dive headbutt through a table, but impaling himself, causing himself to have a hernia in 1988, which would eventually when he came back to WWF, came back short term as a face, trying to get his crown back, from Haku, until he left and went back for one last run in the AWA before they closed their doors, in which he was booked in a series of special appearance matches against Larry Zbyszko, for one last hurrah before the AWA closed. Later in '90, he would go to WCW, where he would finish out it. And also in the late 80s there, between 89 and 91, he would also be wrestling elsewhere aside from of course WCW and AWA. He would also go back and wrestle in Japan and Puerto Rico and Stampede Wrestling up in Canada. As his career was finishing out, the injuries had started to take their toll, to where he finally eventually he pretty much retired for the most part from in-ring competition by '91, in which he'd made the transition from active wrestler to manager. At one point in '91, even leading Lex Luger during his initial world title reign in WCW, as well, and probably the most prolific part of his managerial career in WCW was as manager for the late Leon White, aka the better known as Vader. He was Vader's manager during his feud with Ron Simmons, and would help lead Vader to a number of WCW World Heavyweight titles, up until an auto accident essentially ended his active wrestling career as both a wrestler and a manager to the point to where he couldn't even be a manager anymore. He could not be active. After taking a few years off there in 1999, he would go back to being a promoter, in which he opened up World Legion Wrestling, which eventually became World League Wrestling, that he ran for until up until his death this year. And in that time as well, he would also open up Harley Race Wrestling School, in which he would train a number of wrestlers as well, including Trevor Murdoch. He would promote a lot of family-friendly shows in the St. Louis area. Who would make sporadic appearances over the years for WWE, Total Nonstop Action, and NWA throughout this time. And that pretty much covers a good part of his career. And check the links below. If you want to contact me directly, my Twitter handle will be down there. As you also know, I'm promoting a few GoFundMes, particularly Vic's, promoting Fantasy Soft as well. You guys should check them out. Always never feel like obligated to donate, but if it's on your heart to do so, please consider donating. If you've already donated, please consider donating again. And if you can't donate, at least if you can consider helping out by sharing the links, that'd be appreciated. Also, still got Tug's Indiegogo thing going on down there as well, so you check that out too. Got a nice little comic going with him and his daughter involved. Also, I want to congratulate Tug and his wife on the birth of their second child. Hopefully she's okay and everything's all right. And if you like this content, please consider liking, commenting, sharing, and subscribing. I always look forward to the back and forth with you guys on here. So yeah, let's keep the conversation going. So until Monday, guys, let's keep the conversation going because you're on the mic, and I'll see you on Monday.